first I got to say I'm not from around here originally. Grew up in the suburbs of the suburbs of the suburbs of LA. Anybody from that part of the world? Yeah? Because the suburbs of LA go all the way up to Burlingame, right, at this point. No, of those people who grew up somewhere near the greater Los Angeles area, which when I was a kid they said it was 78 suburbs in search of a city, and now they say it's like 249 suburbs in search of a city. Did anybody there ride the buses? Yeah. How were they? Oh, come on, you're being mild. How were they really? Well, you might be a step of me because I hated riding the buses because I thought they sucked. Now, LA, the things that connected us, the things we focused on, it was called the Rapid Transit District when I was finding. Maybe to be more enlightened, you would be able to hear that. But man, I did not want to be on the buses. I wanted a car because LA was about cars. And growing up as a kid, you would look and notice cars. There was a Porsche, Corvette, Lamborghini, Alfa Romeo, bus. And that was my lot to ride on buses to get anywhere. And the buses were these long, slow creatures that would lumber across LA. And you'd go on a bus, and you'd come to a red light. What do? It's not a trick question. Next is, you come to a red light, you stop, but you come to a green light. What do? You also stop because there's a bus stop. Somebody's going to get on. By the time they get on, the bus is red. Or the light is red. And what you find is you're on this bus lumbering across town. And I remember going to visit a friend that I'd made at camp. I said, Mom, Dad, I want to go visit a friend. I went to go visit this friend. It took me 4.5 hours, 3 buses to get across town, stopping at every single intersection. And then we had an hour to visit, then 4.5 hours to get back. I said, Mom, Dad, this is outrageous. I cannot stand these buses. You have to buy me a car. They said, Joel, that's out of the question. I said, why? Give me one good reason. They said, Joel, you're 12. So I was riding the buses. Not only that, the buses were hot. They were just boiling, stuffy hot. LA can be hot anyways, but the air would bake them. And I went to the bus driver and I said, it's so hot in here. He was like, could you turn on the air conditioner? He said, no, the air conditioners are fake. I said, fake? He said, yeah, they made them fake to save money, so it looked like there's an air conditioner. But it turns out it's cheaper to make a fake air conditioner. And I said, well, can we open the windows? He said, no, those are fake too. See, the people who made the air conditioner figured that people would open the windows. People who made the windows figured people would open the air conditioner, and so it's really hot in here. It was right. It was hot, and it was slow. Did anybody see that movie, Speed? Remember that? It was a movie about a bus that would explode in LA if it went under 50 miles an hour. And in fact, these buses would have exploded if they went over 50 miles an hour, or if they went over 30, over 15. So there I was stuck riding these hot, slow buses across town. This was my lot, to be trapped and riding these buses. And I remember one time I was riding, it was about this time of year, a few weeks before Hanukkah, and I was riding through the Jewish neighborhood of LA, downtown, Cantor's Deli, Fairfax area, and I was the only one on the bus. I was pissed to be on this bus, and I was so mad I thought, I'm going to sit in the seat reserved for elderly and handicapped. So there. I was the only one on the bus, so like, who cares? So I'm sitting there, my elderly handicapped, right behind the driver, right? And we're like lumbering through town. Stop, stop, stop. We go near Farmer's Market. We get to a green light. What do? I'm saying, all right, it's green light. And we stop. And we're waiting a long time. Light goes from green to red, and finally, a guy gets on with a cane and a bag. He says to the driver, how much is it? Figures the senior citizen, it's a quarter. 25 cents. Yeah, quarter. 5, 10, 11. That's it. That's it. My whole life is passing before me. I watched the mold and mildew. I said, my grandchildren will live in that back seat there. I'm on the bus forever and I'm going to die. And finally, the light goes from green to red. Mr. Elderly Handicap counts out all his nickels and pennies. 24, 25. Right? And then, with his shopping bag and his cane, he starts to back up to his seat, which is really my seat, right? Because, I mean, there's only one seat, but it's the elderly handicap, and I'm sitting there, and he just goes to stay. He doesn't even look back, and so I scoot over by the window, And he's there, and suddenly there's two of us on the bus, and now we're like rumbling along. And I'm sort of looking out the window, and he's looking at me looking out the window. And it's a bit awkward to have somebody on a bus staring at you. And finally, he reaches into a shopping bag he has, and he pulls something out. And he holds it up to me, and he says, "What do you think?" And I say, very honestly, "I think it's an orange." Which was an honest answer, but not a complete answer. Because a complete answer would have been, "I think it's an orange. I think you're a weirdo. Get away from me." But he looked and he said, "Yes, it's an orange. But what do you think of the orange?" That kind of confirmed my weirdo theory. But I took it. And of course, it wasn't this one. This is when I was 12. I looked at it and I said, "Well, it says sun-kissed, and it's a navel, so it's seedless. It's a little green, but you'd still call it an orange. You wouldn't call it a green, even if it was all green." He didn't think it was funny either. And I said, "And it looks a little thick, but it's, it's an orange." And I gave it to him and kind of scooted to the window. And he looked at it. And I said, "You're right, it's an orange." It's true. I could see this long bus ride was getting even longer. And finally he said, "I'm not from around here." Duh. Because people in LA don't actually talk to each other on the buses. He said, I came here after the war. And now when I was a kid, the war was a much simpler phrase because the war meant World War II. Now we say the war, it's much more complicated. He said, "Did you learn about the war?" I said, "Yeah, I learned about the war. I go to school and we had classes." And his eyes sort of lit up. He said, "When you learned about the war," he said, "what did they teach you?" I said, and they told me about the Normandy and the D-Day. And, I learned about U.S. history and all this stuff. He said, "Did they tell you about the place where I was?" I said, "I don't know, where were you?" He said, "I was in a place that was called Auschwitz." I said, "Oh, I read an article about that in Hebrew school. There was a sign that said, Arbeit macht frei, work makes free." And his eyes lit up. And he said, when you looked at it, when you learned about it, did they tell you it was black and white?" I said, "No, it had a picture. The picture was black and white, but the place wasn't black and white." He said, "No, it was black and white." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "What I mean is that the guards wore black boots, black shiny boots, so shiny you could see your face reflected in them. A pale white face reflecting in that boot. You could see your clothes, black and white stripes on pressed paper. It was paper. Your pale skin, their black uniforms, everything was black, white, or gray." He said, "The sky would be gray. Then it would snow white everywhere. And then the ashes from the smokestacks would turn the snow gray. Everything was black, white, or gray." He said, "Look." And now I pulled up his sleeve. He said, "You see these numbers? They're blue now, but when they burned them in, they were black, black and white, black, white, gray." He said, "What I remember is the food was also gray. We would stand in a long line, and there at the front would be like a barrel, a metal drum where they cooked water, and maybe 8 or 9 potatoes had dissolved in this water, and we would stand there with a black metal bowl, and when we got to the front, we would get a scoop, maybe if we're lucky, a little piece of potato. That was food for a day. Black, white, gray, and cold. Every day, trying to stay warm. And my way of staying warm, many people, was when we had a moment, was to find paper. The clothes were made of paper. We could put paper in our clothes. Shoes. If they had holes, you might patch with paper, because holes in your shoes, from this you would die. So I looked for paper, and I remember one day I was looking near the edge of near the fence, as close as I could go. There was a piece of paper on the ground. The snow was gray all around it. I picked up the paper, went to crumble it in, and beneath the paper was something. There was white snow, and in the center of that snow was something I looked at and stared, and I had to look at it because, you see, I had been there 6 months. I had forgotten that color. I realized I picked it up, I hid it. If someone could see it, they might kill me to take it. I took it back, I hid it in the wall in the barracks that night. And that night, as everyone slept, I brought it out. You have to understand how hungry I was. I had eaten nothing but potato water for 6 months. I wanted to eat it as you would eat an apple. But I knew that if I did, I would have nothing. So instead, I rolled it in my hands just to feel it. And then I scratched the skin. I closed my eyes and I smelled it. And what I smelled in that was not Auschwitz. It was the fields outside of Haifa. For I had a cousin who'd moved there and what was then called Palestine. He lived on a kibbutz. Long before the war, he had written to me. And he had said, here in Israel, we grow oranges. And the smell of those blossoms fills the air. It's the smell of freedom. When I closed my eyes, I was free. When I opened them, I was in Auschwitz. I couldn't eat the orange, but I brought it out each night. And I said, I won't eat it until after a bad day. In Auschwitz, you didn't have to wait long for a bad day. Came a day of selection, a day when a man stood in front of the line with a bayonet, pointing right or left. Those who went right went back to the barracks. Those who went left went to the showers. And they never came back. That night, I gathered those who were with me and said, I have something for you. Let me show you. I took it out, and I showed it to them. I passed it to each one, and each one rolled it in their hands. And when it came back to me, I peeled it. Careful not to spill a drop. I gave each one a section. I closed my eyes and I ate mine, and I will tell you, nothing before or since has tasted so sweet. Afterwards, I was left with a peel, and I held them as you would Havdalah spices to remind you of the sweetness after Shabbat, spices. I smelled them each night, and before long, spring came. The snow melted. There were cracks in the cement, and through those cracks came green plants with yellow flowers. To the guards, they were weeds. To us, they were color. He said, I was rescued, and I came here, to this place. But you see that orange? It saved my life. As he said this, the bus stopped. He got up, and he said, young man, remember the sweet things in life. He handed me the orange, got off the bus, never saw him again. But what I'm left with from the thing that connects us is an orange.